and welcome to this week's Share a Story. I'm really excited because today joining us is one of my good friends, Sarah, and Sarah is going to introduce herself to start with, and she's going to share her story of why she would like the Alexandra Theatre to be saved. So, hello, Sarah.
Hello.
This is so weird doing it on Zoom.
I know, isn't it?
We hope this will work. So can you, first of all, Sarah, for those of people that don't know you, can you just give us a little brief introduction to who you are and why you're linked with the Alexandra Theatre?
I will indeed. So I'm Sarah. I have taken part in Panto at the Alexandra Theatre myself for the first time since I performed in school, so that was amazing. But mainly my involvement is in the youth group, so the NEWTS part of NEWTS, where my son has been attending since he was 8. And I help for them and help out with costumes and props and things, and behind the stage when they get to perform at the Alex.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. So, Sarah, I'm going to start off. We're going to ask you some questions because I think that's a good way of telling your story. So, the first question that I've got for you is looking at the current proposed plans that are out from Teambridge. Really, what are your initial thoughts when you look at those plans?
Well, I guess the problem with the current plans and having been part of this group and talked about it is that they'd have you believe that a multifunctional performance space will give the same as the Alexandra Theatre would. And when people look at what's important in performing, like being creative, telling a story, combating loneliness, you know, those sorts of things you would think could be performed in just any space. But when you've got a space that during the day is going to be a market or eateries or aspects of the community like that, you can't really get a true theatre experience out of that, because each day it's going to need to be a functioning market and eatery space. So you haven't got the scenery, the orchestra pit, the dressing rooms, the makeup rooms, the spotlights, and all the atmosphere that comes with an old theatre, which is becoming increasingly rare. And I think it just wouldn't lend itself to theatrical performances. You could do perhaps a simple one-night show, but for all those who we've supported to perform at the Alex, including my own son, I think they've also performed in lots of other spaces, school halls, village halls, school theatres. And when you ask them and you ask the audiences that have seen them, they've been lovely performances, but they're nothing compares to the experience, both from an audience and a performer, of being in an old theatre with all its history embedded, and almost you can feel the characters and the experiences that have gone before you while you're in those spaces. And I suppose what I really don't understand about the current plans is if you look at them, it actually looks like there is room for what everybody wants. There is actually room in the market for eateries and some kind of generic space without having to encroach on that theatre space. Because if there are other eateries in the town that are available, and people would then be encouraged to explore the town further rather than just staying in one place, and then you'd get the balance of retaining a market town that still has an old historical theatre.
Yeah. I have to agree with you, Sarah. To me, I feel very, very much the same. So it's lovely to hear that. I know I'm not alone in thinking that surely, actually, the plans could still be changed, but keeping the theatre aspect. Yeah. Definitely.
And still keeping what the council want, still keeping what they want from the market aspect. So
yeah, everybody could be happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to now on to my second question. You mentioned in the introduction that your son Zach is a member of NEWTS, and obviously I have known Zach for a very long time because he joined when I was leading the group. So I've been able to be lucky enough to see how far Zach has come during his time at NEWTS, and the confidence he has gained watching him perform at the Alexandra, etc., has been amazing. I wonder if you would be kind enough to kind of share Zach's story with everybody and why this journey has been so special for him.
Yeah, well, Zach's first show was Annie, and he was 8, I think, at that time. And, you know, he was an 8-year-old who was struggling, discovering and accepting his differences. So he has some physical and learning difficulties. And up to that point, he felt like he stood on the outside of friendship groups. So he was struggling to keep up and understand socially in the playground and physically. I mean, he was lucky enough to be in a small village school where he was very accepted, but it still made a difference to him, and he hadn't quite found his place, really. So when he first began his theatre journey, he started to build up some friendships really quickly at NEWTS, and started to begin to understand the rehearsal space, but nothing could have prepared him for the experience of when he performed in Annie in the May. He'd been an audience member at the Alexandra Theatre, but when he first stepped into that theatre space and the cinema screen wasn't there, it was just completely magical. The excitement and the build-up as he explored the wings and the orchestra pit and all those sorts of things. And all the older cast members from previous years were showing him round and telling him all their stories of what happens in the dressing room and what it's like on show night, and the spotlights being really warm on the stage, and the audience who'd actually paid to come and see them perform, they'd actually decided to get dressed up for the evening and come out and see them. And once Zach performed on that stage, nothing was really quite the same about his character. The atmosphere, the relationships, and what he calls his NEWTS family, his theatre family, were created within the Alexander walls, really, because it doesn't happen anywhere else. As a group, they then were almost unrecognisable afterwards. They'd go back to the green rooms and they'd rehearse and they'd do all their weekly performances, but it was always about, okay, well, when's the next show at the Alex? And we'd have other shows that we were doing and other performances and drama workshops and things like that. But it was always about, when's the next show? What's the next show? And there was like a renewed enthusiasm. So taking sort of Zach's perspective, I suppose, he was a boy who felt very different up till then, and he ranked himself bottom of all his peer groups because academically and in sport. And over the last 9 years, he's coming up 17 in April. He's come on hugely, yes, with his learning and his schooling, but the priorities for us with Zach, once he had his diagnosis, was that his well-being and his happiness and his long-term mental health. And I think the theatre group really became a lifeline for him during secondary school, when the academic and social struggles really kicked in, when teenagers experienced all their insecurities that all teenagers do, which are exacerbated. And it had a real impact on his self-esteem and his loneliness and his confidence. And in the darker times, he would kind of just say, wait for Friday. He would wait for Friday to come around, and the whole week had been about getting him to Friday so he could go back and have the friendships. And he'd come out and he'd smile and he'd laugh, and we'd be en route home. And I remember one Friday we were on our way home and he'd had a really, really difficult week. And he said, this is the only place where I feel like I can be me. And like it's his second home, really. And I think the culture that surrounds theatre is really inclusive. Yeah. And I think it's known for being a very accepting environment. And it creates and develops these attitudes of inclusion and acceptance. And the opportunity to be part of something like that really needs not to be lost for future generations. It's the only mainstream group that Zach has been able to be a part of and feel like he genuinely fits. And I think without that, he wouldn't be the person he is now. He wouldn't be the confident, caring, accepting person he is, who's really learning to self-advocate and be much more confident in his own skin.
It's amazing. Oh, it makes me emotional, Sarah. I think because, as I said a minute ago, really, I've been so lucky enough to witness this of Zach's journey. It does feel really emotional hearing you say all those things. And the Alexandra Theatre, 100%, is where they gel as a unit. That's where it's those dressing rooms. The dressing rooms, you can't quite explain it, can you, Sarah? But that's where the friendships happen. That's where the magic happens, and where new friendships are made is just being in the dressing rooms. So I think for me, when you look at those plans, like you said, with regards to the dressing rooms, the orchestra pit, the makeup room, all those little rooms that really you think, oh, a dressing room, it's a dressing room. That's where the friendships are made. Certainly, well, for the adults and the youth, but that's kind of, I think, the bit where they gel.
Yeah.
And so going back to this multifunctional space that doesn't show any rooms of sign of a dressing area or room, instantly you've lost a massive element of why it's so wonderful to perform in a theatre.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Zach is incredible and his journey has been amazing, and I can't wait to see where he goes on from here, because I don't think it will be the end of his theatre journey at all. In fact, that's the beginning. Let's just hope it's at the Alexandra, Sarah, that it can carry on. But thank you for sharing that with us, because I know that's it's difficult, isn't it, to talk about subjects that can make us feel quite emotional.
Absolutely.
Because it's just he's one special boy, and he is a credit to you, Sarah, because he is awesome. We all love Zach. So I'm going to just go back then to a question with regards to this multifunctional space. And those of you that I know you've probably all fed up of the sight of me on social media at the moment, I chirp on about this all the time because I absolutely detest that saying, that phrase of a multifunctional space being a space to perform in. What would you say, Sarah, is the difference between the theatre, I know we've touched on it a little bit, and the multifunctional space?
Well, I think the main difference, I suppose, really, is that, as a parent and a chaperone and an observer, really, you don't have the same atmosphere, and it's very difficult to describe what that is. But it can't be replicated and repeated anywhere else. It is unique. So that's partly what makes it very difficult to describe. But I think so often we talk to young people about how theatre is so good for expressing themselves and self-discovery, and reminds people that they're not alone. It's very immediate and evolving. It's educational. It's a very hands-on way to learn. And I think part of that learning comes with the history that's already there. And we tell young people all the time that, especially in the difficult times as teenagers, it's not what's on the outside that matters, it's what's on the inside. And when we're thinking about this space and they're talking about, preserving the outside of the building, actually, the facade of the Alexander isn't the most important part. Yes, it's a historical building, but actually it's what's on the inside. It's a beautiful building on the inside. It has the soul and heart of what theatre is on the inside. And I think there's no real other way of expressing that human connection of different situations that are evolving. It's really good for exploring all sorts of situations that are happening in society. And I think I found a quote that was an Oscar Wilde quote, and it said, I regard the theatre as the greatest of all art forms, the most immediate way in which a human being can share with another a sense of what it is to be a human being.
Oh,
You know, when you think about the amount of time that young people spend on screens and what this has meant for them and their mental health, I think we need to sort of stop paying lip service to this. Mental health is really important. They need creative spaces. And then doing the opposite.
yeah.
Actually start investing in these spaces that already are doing so much for mental health. And if you remove that, you add to that problem.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more, Sarah. That's a lovely quote. Can you share that quote with us?
Well, yes.
Put it on our page. Okay, Sarah, you are doing amazing. Thank you so much for this. There's only 2 more questions that I've got for you, Sarah.
Yeah.
So the next question that I've got is, why is the arts so important in our community?
Yeah, well, I think I kind of touched on that in the last question, but it is just, theatre is so many things to so many people. I mean, it's a night out for an audience. It's the ability to express yourself. Actually, most people who start out in theatre are actually quite shy, and it's about confidence and being able to express themselves as somebody else before they learn to express themselves as themselves. And I think it's a really good way of being able to explore other people's perspective. I think it's a really practical way of doing that. And actually for young people who have learning difficulties and those that don't, it is another form of communication. We found that by doing NEWTS and Zach performing so well and making a connection so well with being able to perform, that enabled us to find a form of therapy for Zach, for his anxieties and his concerns, he now has access to a drama therapist that we regularly touch base with when he's going through difficult times, and he now knows when he needs her. He gets to a point where he says, right, I need to go and do this. And you only find out those things by being exposed to it. It's not something you can tell a child or tell a young person and they will go and do. They have to come to that themselves, and the only way they do that is through exploring expression and theatre. It's creative, and there are very few opportunities for young people to be creative these days. It's always moving, it's evolving, it explores current social themes, all those aspects that are really important in theatre. And it promotes social change. I mean, you can use theatre to promote all sorts of social change. Some of the West End shows that are out there now are all about promoting inclusion and diversity.
Yeah.
So I think all sorts of things going for it, the arts. And I think, again, people pay lip service. It's really important to have the arts, but there's still very little opportunity.
Yeah, particularly in Newton Abbot at the moment.
Yeah.
But you know, there's different clubs going on that children, adults can be part of. But there isn't like an arts sort of hub, centre, anything like that. That could be a really kind of vibrant asset to have in the community. And like you said, it would bring us all together, wouldn't it? Yeah. Like it would bring communities together again.
Yeah, there aren't very many opportunities for fully inclusive groups, because when you're doing things like sports, you have to take into account ability and, you know, all those sorts of things. But when you're looking at performing and art, everyone can kind of do it to their own level.
Yeah,
still be included within that same group. It's one of the only kind of fully inclusive atmospheres that you can get, I think. And it has been really important for Zach to be part of a mainstream group. But actually, I also think that a lot of the young people within NEWTS who maybe don't get exposed to lots of other people with additional needs, it's actually been really good for them to be able to explore that and have an experience themselves of that.
Yeah, 100%, Sarah. I would say definitely we have all learnt, you know, we keep saying how much Zach has gained from NEWTS and the Alex and performing, but we have all learnt and gained so much from Zach.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
And that opportunity needs to be. We need to have more of that, don't we? We need to have more of that in the community, bringing people together. And the Alexandra is the place to keep.
It's the place to be. There is the only one.
It's the only one. That's it. Okay. We have one more question.
Fire away.
With all of this social media that we're doing at the moment, the hope is that these sharer stories in particular get viewed by members of our council. Because if our councillors hear our voices and what it means to our community, our hope is that they'll start listening and these proposed plans will get changed and the theatre could be saved. That's kind of why we're doing these sharer stories, is for voices to be heard. So if this sharer story today, Sarah, your story, was to get across now to the councillors, what would be your message to them?
Well, I think, we've focused a lot on the young people, but I think it's inclusive of everybody. And I think everyone has their struggles. We've talked a lot about Zach having some struggles, but everybody at some point does. And it's going to be no more evident in society than it is right now. And as we come out of this pandemic. And touching on what I said before, I just think it's really important that we stop saying, your mental health is really important, well-being is really important, and actually look at the underneath of that and think, well, this theatre is already an access for that well-being. It's a route where people can feel good about themselves, explore emotions, all those sorts of things. And I think we need to prioritise that and the mental health of people. And it allows them to safely explore situations in that theatre environment that they might not otherwise get to explore. And how sad would it be if future generations didn't get the opportunity to be part of something as special as that theatre, especially when, there are people who've been in that theatre and who started off there and who are now at the West End. One of the stories that we've already shared was about that.
Yeah. And
I think that level of achievement can't be overlooked. But I think what's equally and arguably more important is the journeys and lives of those who perform in the theatre, for whom it will be their only experience of performing in a theatre. Yeah. So lots of the people, young people in NEWTS, possibly Zach, it's been extremely influential in their lives and their well-being, how the person they are now. It's really helped him become a valued member of his community, to learn to self-advocate for what he needs. And for many, this historical local theatre is going to be their only chance of performing and getting that theatre buzz in a real world theatre experience. And it's not the same as film, it's all encompassing. It's a huge collaboration of many different people with lighting and orchestra and actors and costumes, and the effects that has on society and them as a group when we're in a world of digital technology is immeasurable, really, I think. And I think being with a living, breathing group of people and performing is what adds to the human spirit. That's what is needed to keep a community alive. You remove those spaces and the community just becomes more removed from the town centre.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I think you've put that across brilliantly. I really hope our councillors do get to watch this, and hence why whenever I put any posts on our social media page of Keeping the Alex Alive, is share these stories on your own. If everybody shares Sarah's story on their own social media platform, we have more chance of our councillors hearing our voices, because I'm convinced that many of those councillors do not even know what is at the Alexandra Theatre. They have probably never been backstage. They don't know that there's an orchestra pit there. They don't know that there's a full flying rig, screens, all of it, the lots, makeup rooms. They don't know. And I remember when we had our interview with BBC Radio Devon, Sarah, I said it in my speech, and I know when me and you chatted before, I said about it. She went backstage. She said, well, she was blown away. She said, wow. And the first thing she said was, the smell. Now, you can't, as you said, all these things we're trying to explain to people how amazing this theatre is, and you can't quite do it justice. But there is this smell of history, of theatre, and there's an energy, there's just a presence of that is, you can't describe it, can you? You can't describe it. And it's special. It's a special, unique space. And I guess from hearing your story, Sarah, and so many others, the worry is when this, or if, let's hope there isn't a when, let's hope it doesn't happen, but if this was to be ripped out, it will be gone forever. And the council would never be able to build a theatre like it again.
And still you wouldn't get the history back.
Never.
That's the problem, isn't it? You can't.
Never. And, you know, so you just think
about what we get rid of that's historical. It's.
Yeah. Not everything needs to be replaced, does it? No. I don't, you know, I think, I just, yeah. Let's just hope your story, Sarah, and everyone else's that is sharing their stories gets heard by the councillors, and they take this really seriously into what their current plans are going to do, and what effect. I don't think they're quite prepared. I don't think they've been quite prepared for what's come out from us already. No. So, you know, let's just keep all praying that our voices are heard, keep sharing our stories. Sarah, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So much. Because it really does, it means the world, not just to me personally, but to our community and everybody who is desperate to see this Alexandra Theatre safe. So thank you for taking the time to Zoom with me. And we've got something lovely to follow, haven't we, Sarah?
Yeah, because it's Zach's story, really, and it is amazing.
Zach's story. I will prepare you that you may need tissues at the ready. I think I nearly got through a whole box of Kleenex. So, thank you so much, Sarah.
You're very welcome.
Everybody, thank you for watching. Please share Sarah's story and Zach's story. They're amazing. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire.
My name is Zach. I joined NEWTS when I was 7 or 8 years old. I've always loved going to the theatre and musicals. When I joined NEWTS, there was lots of things I found difficult, and some of them I still do. But NEWTS gave me a home from home, where I can make new friends and learn skills all towards performing in the theatre. My first show in the Alexandra Theatre was Annie. I don't think I had ever been so excited to be under a stage, in the dressing rooms, with my new friends telling me all their stories of their first performances. I think this photo was taken of me before I went on stage for the first time in the Alex, shows just how much it meant to me. We all cried after our last performance, as it felt like one of the best times of our lives. It was something that I think is hard to understand unless you actually are lucky enough to experience it yourself. Since being in Annie, I have also been in the NEWTS show every year. We have performed Beauty and the Beast, Bugsy Malone, Back to the 80s, Peter Pan and Oliver. We were supposed to do Fame last year, but the pandemic put a stop to that. It has been really hard this year not be able to go to NEWTS rehearsing for our show together and perform at the Alex. I know it has been really hard for lots of my NEWTS friends too. But this is just because of one bad year. Can you imagine if the Alex was gone for good? I can't imagine not being able to perform in the Alex permanently because it could not be saved. This would be heartbreaking and have such a bad effect on all the young people who would get to rehearse and perform in that space. It is completely magical and an experience I just could not have done anywhere else. I have performed in school and other halls, but nothing, absolutely nothing, is like performing in an old theatre with all its magic. I'm now nearly 17 years old and I'm getting towards the end of NEWT's journey. I'm already thinking I would join the adult group of NADMAX, as the thought of moving away from my friends, theatre family, and not performing in that amazing space is just too sad. If I had not able to be a part of this experience, I know that my self-esteem, confidence, and ability to express myself would not be as good as it is now. My experience of the theatre for the last 9 years of my life are a huge part of who I am as a person today. I think we need to value the theatre and its history, and both of these things are wrapped up in the Alex. Please help us to help others understand how important this is to save the Alexandra Theatre. Thank you for listening.